As we know, there's been all sorts of pro-Palestinian protests right around the world, but especially in London. Anti-Semitism is rife, and so British Prime Minister Rishi Sunak gave a speech over the weekend saying that they need to do everything they can to crack down on, quote-unquote, extremism. Have a listen to what he said.
What started as protests on our street has descended into intimidation, threats and planned acts of violence. Jewish children fearful to wear their school uniform lest it reveal their identity. Muslim women abused in the street for the actions of a terrorist group they have no connection with. Now our democracy itself is a target. To that end, this month the government will implement a new, robust framework for how it deals with this issue, to ensure that we are dealing with the root causes of this problem, and that no extremist organisations or individuals are being lent legitimacy by their actions and interactions with central government.
Now, just for some context, when he said democracy is under threat, he wasn't being dramatic. With British MPs voting on things like ceasefires in Gaza, at least 3 female MPs have had to be provided with bodyguards after they received death threats if they didn't vote a particular way. And in fact, during the vote, have a look at this vision. This is Big Ben and the British Parliament. Someone projected onto Big Ben and the Parliament pro-Palestinian words. I'm not sure if you can quite make it out there, but it says from the river to the sea. Police were unable to track down who was doing it and weren't even sure whether it was illegal to do that or not, despite the fact it's a vile anti-Semitic trope that's being broadcast onto the British Parliament itself. And so Rishi Sunak has got a fair bit to worry about. Currently, extremism is defined as vocal or active opposition to fundamental British values. What Rishi Sunak is proposing is that they would say it's not just opposition to values, it's anything that undermines those values. And that definition, if applied to a group, would mean that group cannot receive government funding and can't engage with government bodies. What's interesting about this, though, Caleb, is that it's still a bit vague for my liking. He says extremism, and did you note that he gave an example of these anti-Semitic pro-Palestinian rallies, but then he was very sure to mention some Muslim women who apparently were abused in the street as well. And that may well have been true, but we all know that's not the big problem in the West right now.
Yes.
That's not where the threats are coming from. And I just wonder, if you can't be specific about the threat, if you're going to fall back on vagaries and generalities, can you really defeat the threat in the first place?
Well, no. I mean, obviously he's talking out of both sides of his mouth to try and placate what is a pretty large Muslim community in the UK these days. And this sort of all culminated of what triggered all of this in the end was the fact that a far-left candidate by the name of Geroge Galloway won a by-election in the UK over the weekend, and he basically ran on an anti-Israel agenda. That was his whole thing this time. He's been an MP before, but that was his major plank this time round. Another thing that Sunak said was, quote, Islamist extremists and far-right groups are spreading a poison. That poison is extremism. Again, he has to say, well, we've got this group over here and we've got this group over here. Now, when he talks about far-right extremists, what he's talking about is counter-protesters who have come out in response to the protests that have been ramping up in recent weeks in the UK in support of Gaza and Hamas, etc. The operative part of the word counter-protest is counter. They wouldn't be protesting in the first place if you didn't have those demonstrations in support of Hamas. You cannot suggest that they are the same thing, and I think you're right. Unless you are willing to say that this is the problem and this alone is the problem, Islamism, then you'll never fix it.
Yeah.
Because you're chasing two tails that will never, ever be grabbed.
Yeah. I mean, he talks about the forces of division, which I'm not sure what the forces of division are, but it shows you how much trouble the UK and other parts of Europe are in, Liz, that they're afraid. We all know what he's talking about, but he dare not say it.
Well, I think he was actually being honest when he worked the right into that, because we all know this will be far-reaching legislation. It won't target radical Islam at all, because that would be Islamophobic. And it will create, as he said, a very robust system of And this is something, again, it's not just the UK. We're seeing other countries around the always Western countries, creating legislation that is going to create a minefield in the future and does not just target the group that we think it is. And they have claimed, oh no, we made this legislation because of this specific threat or this specific group of people. This is the chokehold of government. Because who's to say those shared values aren't diversity, inclusion, and equality?
What are British values?
In which case, I'm not on board with those values.
Yeah, if you believe that marriage is between a man and a woman, then all of a sudden you're an extremist who's undermining British values.
Exactly. So when he says things like, it is not enough to live side by side, we must live together, united by shared values and a shared commitment to this country, who gets to decide what those values are? Because I'm pretty sure I don't share many with you, Rishi Sunak, or probably any other leader that thinks making this broad, sweeping type legislation, laws of the land, I would not be on side with that pretty much no matter what's in it, because what you are doing is creating almost like a state religion. This is what you can and can't say. This is what it is and isn't acceptable to believe. Our protest laws would go out the window.
So you've got these two problems.
It's terrifying.